Welcome to Myth and Moonlight, where we travel together through stories designed to help you find a deep, peaceful sleep. I'm Aaron, your guide tonight, and I'll be with you as we explore the ancient sands of Egypt, where mysteries and wisdom await in the quiet stillness of the desert night. My own journey with the concept of riddles and questions began many years ago. During a particularly difficult time in my life, I found that the questions we ask ourselves often matter more than the answers we seek. In the quiet moments between thoughts, I discovered a peace that transcended understanding, much like our wanderer will discover tonight. Tonight, we'll journey across golden sands and beneath star-filled skies, to a time when the desert held secrets waiting to be uncovered. We'll follow a path of gentle discovery, where wisdom comes not from knowing all answers, but from embracing the questions themselves. Our story will unfold at the unhurried pace of desert winds, giving you all the time you need to settle into comfort and rest. At its heart, our journey tonight explores how sometimes the most profound answers come when we learn to be still, to listen, and to find peace within the questions themselves, just as the stars above ancient Egypt revealed their patterns to those patient enough to observe. The quiet wisdom within you awaits your gentle attention. So find a comfortable position now, wherever you are, and allow yourself to begin relaxing. Our journey to the ancient sands is about to begin, and all you need to do is listen and drift along with the story. Let everything else fade away as we prepare to wander together beneath the Egyptian stars. I'd like to invite you now to settle more deeply into comfort. Find the position that feels most natural for your body, allowing your weight to be fully supported. Perhaps adjust your pillow or blanket one last time, finding that perfect arrangement that tells your body it's safe to completely let go. Most of us carry questions throughout our days, wonderings about our path, our purpose, our next steps. Like ancient travelers consulting the stars, we seek guidance and meaning. You might recognize this feeling, the weight of unanswered questions, the tension of seeking certainty in an uncertain world. Tonight, like our wanderer in ancient Egypt, you are invited to discover how sometimes the greatest peace comes not from finding all answers, but from resting comfortably within the questions themselves. Let's begin by bringing gentle awareness to your body, noticing any areas that might be holding tension without judgment. Starting with your feet, allow them to become heavy and warm against the surface supporting them. Feel how they naturally want to relax completely, letting go of any gripping or tension. That feeling of release can flow upward into your ankles, softening them entirely. This relaxation continues up into your calves, gently dissolving any tightness there. Feel how your legs become increasingly heavy and comfortable as each muscle receives permission to rest. This wave of relaxation flows naturally into your knees, softening them completely, and then up into your thighs, releasing any holding there. Your entire lower body can now feel pleasantly heavy, warm, and at ease. The relaxation expands into your hips and lower back, places that often carry tension throughout the day. Allow these areas to soften and widen, releasing any pressure or discomfort. Feel how your breathing naturally deepens as your lower body relaxes completely. This peaceful feeling flows up into your abdomen and chest, where each breath brings further relaxation. Notice how your breathing finds its own natural rhythm. No need to control or change it. With each inhale, fresh energy flows in, and with each exhale, tension simply melts away. Your breathing becomes slower, deeper, more comfortable with each passing moment. Now this wave of relaxation moves into your shoulders, dissolving any tightness or tension they've been holding. Feel them becoming heavy and soft, gently dropping down away from your ears. This relaxing sensation flows down your arms, through your elbows, into your wrists and hands. Your fingers might feel slightly warm or tingly as they relax completely. Finally, this peaceful feeling rises up into your neck, releasing any strain or pressure. Your entire head can feel comfortably supported, with relaxation spreading across your scalp, softening your forehead, your eyebrows, the space around your eyes. Your jaw becomes soft and slightly open, with your tongue resting comfortably in your mouth. Your entire face can now feel smooth, peaceful, and at complete rest. As you continue to relax, imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast desert beneath an endless twilight sky. The air is still warm from the day's heat, but a gentle breeze brings the first hint of evening coolness. The horizon stretches infinitely before you, with sand dunes creating soft, flowing lines against the deepening blue of the sky. Far in the distance, a few stars have begun to appear, ancient light guiding travelers for thousands of years. Listen to the profound silence of this place, a silence that feels alive with subtle sounds. Perhaps you notice the gentle shifting of sand carried by the breeze, or the distant call of a bird returning to its nest. There's a quality of peaceful emptiness here, a spaciousness that invites your mind to expand and then gently release all concerns. The ground beneath your feet feels solid yet yielding, countless grains of sand supporting you completely. Notice how your body stands or sits with perfect balance upon this ancient earth. There's a sensation of being simultaneously grounded and free, connected to the earth yet unburdened. Your shoulders can drop even lower now, your breath flowing easily in this clear, clean air. The desert air carries subtle scents, perhaps the mineral quality of sun-warmed stone, the slight sweetness of distant date palms, or the crisp clarity that comes with evening. The taste of the air itself might remind you of warmth and antiquity, of countless stories carried across these sands. These gentle sensory experiences help anchor you more deeply in this peaceful landscape. Throughout human history, the desert has represented a place of both challenge and profound insight. Many wisdom traditions speak of the clarity that comes from simplicity. When distractions fall away, deeper understanding can emerge. Like the sand that reveals the tracks of all who pass, our minds can become clear enough to recognize the patterns of our thoughts, allowing us to choose which paths to follow and which to simply observe with gentle awareness. Know that you are exactly where you need to be in this moment. Your body knows how to find perfect rest, and your mind can safely release into the story that's about to unfold. There's nothing you need to figure out or accomplish. Simply allowing yourself to experience is enough. You have complete permission to drift, to dream, to follow wherever the journey leads, or to simply float in peaceful awareness. As we transition now into our main story, allow yourself to merge with our wanderer, to see through their eyes and feel through their senses. The ancient desert awaits, and with it, encounters that will unfold at the perfect pace for your deepening relaxation. The journey begins now across the timeless sands of Egypt. Kem had always been a wanderer. Even as a child in the busy streets of Thebes, he would slip away from his father's pottery workshop to explore the city's hidden corners, narrow alleyways opening suddenly into sunlit courtyards, forgotten shrines nestled between grand temples, or market stalls carrying treasures from lands he could only imagine. Now, in his 30th year, his feet had carried him far beyond the city of his birth, following the life-giving Nile as it carved its ancient path through the desert. He stood now at the edge of a small oasis, watching the last golden light of day illuminate the palms swaying gently above. His tall, lean frame cast a long shadow across the sand, his skin bronzed from years beneath the Egyptian sun. Dark eyes, observant and thoughtful, surveyed the peaceful scene before him. A short beard, neatly trimmed despite his travels, framed a face marked more by curiosity than hardship. His simple linen tunic, dusty from the road, but of good quality, suggested a man of modest means but careful habits. Around his neck hung a small carved scarab, a gift from his mother before her passing to the next world many years ago. The oasis spread before him like a green jewel set in gold, a small, perfect circle of life amid the endless desert. Date palms ringed a pool of water so still it mirrored the deepening blue of the evening sky. Several mud brick dwellings clustered near the water's edge, smoke rising from cooking fires as families prepared their evening meals. The air carried the mingled scents of cooking bread, sweet dates, and the clean mineral smell of desert sand, cooling after the heat of day. This was the western edge of the great kingdom, where the fertile black lands gave way to the red lands of the desert. Beyond this point, the true emptiness began, a vast sea of sand that stretched toward the setting sun. Few ventured there without great purpose, for the desert was both revered and feared, a place where the boundaries between this world and the divine realms grew thin. Yet something had been calling Kem westward, a persistent pull like a melody heard just at the edge of hearing. The rhythm of life moved differently here compared to the bustling energy of Thebes. People walked more slowly, spoke more softly, as if matching the unhurried pace of the desert itself. Time seemed to expand in the clear air, measured by the gradual arc of the sun, rather than the urgent demands of commerce and construction that drove life in the great city. Kem felt his breathing naturally slowing to match this gentler cadence, his shoulders dropping as the tension of travel gradually released. As twilight deepened, Kem found a small rise of sand near the edge of the oasis and sat, watching as one by one stars appeared in the darkening sky. The familiar constellations emerged, the celestial forms of Osiris, Isis, and Horus, taking their eternal places in the heavens. These same stars had guided sailors along the Nile for countless generations, their patterns unchanging even as dynasties rose and fell below. There was comfort in their constancy, Kem thought, as he rested his travel-weary body on the still warm sand. His fingers idly traced patterns, feeling the smooth texture of countless tiny grains. Each one had once been stone, gradually worn down by water and wind, over more time than any human could comprehend. The thought brought a familiar sense of both smallness and belonging, He was just one man, yet connected to cycles greater than himself. Something about this place felt significant, though Kem couldn't yet say why. Throughout his travels, he had learned to trust this quiet inner, knowing this sense of rightness that occasionally arose without clear reason. It had led him to unexpected teachers, hidden temples with ancient wisdom, and communities where he could share his growing knowledge of medicinal plants and distant lands. This same feeling had grown stronger as he journeyed westward, becoming nearly undeniable as he approached this particular oasis. As darkness fully embraced the desert, the temperature dropped rapidly. Kem wrapped his linen cloak more tightly around his shoulders, feeling its familiar weight and the slight roughness of the fabric against his skin. The stars above multiplied until they filled the black sky like scattered sand, their light casting the faintest silver glow across the landscape. In the distance, he heard the soft lowing of cattle being settled for the night, and closer, the gentle splash as someone filled a water jar from the pool. These simple sensations, the cooling air, the weight of his cloak, the distant sounds of life continuing its patient rhythms, allowed Kem to sink deeper into the present moment. His journey had been long, and tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. For now, there was just this perfect stillness, this star-filled sky, this breath entering and leaving his body in peaceful waves. He allowed his eyes to close just for a moment, drinking in the profound quiet of the desert night. Morning came gradually, first as a subtle lightening at the eastern horizon, then as a wash of pale gold across the desert floor. Kem woke with the first light, as had become his habit during years of traveling. He spent a few moments in stillness, feeling the cool morning air against his face, listening to the first stirrings of birds among the palm trees, allowing his body to make the gentle transition from sleep to wakefulness. His morning ritual was simple but consistent. First, he splashed cool water from his small clay jar onto his face, the bracing sensation fully awakening his senses. Then, facing the brightening eastern sky, he performed a series of slow, deliberate movements, stretching upward toward the emerging sun, then folding forward toward the earth, feeling the pleasant pull along his back and legs. These movements, learned from a temple healer many journeys ago, helped prepare his body for whatever the day might bring. The oasis was coming alive around him. Women gathered at the central pool, clay jars balanced expertly on their heads, their conversations creating a gentle murmur that carried across the water. Children darted between the mud brick houses, their laughter brightening the morning air. Several elders sat in the shade of a large acacia tree, observing the day's beginning with quiet dignity. Nearby, a man around Kem's age carefully led a small herd of goats toward patches of scrubby vegetation at the oasis edge. Kem approached the water's edge, nodding respectfully to the women who moved slightly aside to allow him access. The water felt cool and silky against his hands as he filled his jar, its surface reflecting the intensifying blue of the morning sky. Looking into the clear depths, he could see tiny fish darting in the shallows and the intricate patterns of light playing across the sandy bottom. "You are not from this place." The voice belonged to an elderly woman who had been observing him with interest. Her face was deeply lined from years under the desert sun, but her eyes were bright and alert in their nest of wrinkles. "No, mother," Kem replied with respect. "I have journeyed from Thebes, following the river westward." She nodded slowly, considering. Few travel this direction without purpose. Most seekers journey toward the temples of the great cities, not away from them. Kem smiled, appreciating her directness. I follow a question rather than an answer, he said simply, not entirely sure himself what drew him westward. The old woman's eyes sparkled with interest. Then you have chosen a wise path indeed. It is the quality of our questions that determines the life we create. She gestured toward the acacia tree where the other elders sat. Join us this evening when the day's heat has passed. There are stories you might find valuable for your journey. Kem accepted with a grateful nod, then continued his morning explorations. The modest settlement consisted of perhaps 20 dwellings, arranged in a rough semicircle around the life-giving water. Despite its small size, he noticed signs of prosperity, well-maintained buildings, healthy livestock, children with round cheeks and bright eyes. The oasis clearly provided well for those who had made their home here. At the western edge of the settlement, slightly apart from the other buildings, stood a structure different from the rest. While the homes were practical, rectangular buildings of mud brick, this structure was circular, its outer wall decorated with geometric patterns in faded blue and red pigments. A small garden surrounded it, bursting with herbs and flowering plants that seemed improbably lush in this desert environment. As Kem observed the unusual dwelling, its door opened to reveal a woman of middle years. Her hair, streaked with silver and bound with a simple cord, framed a face of remarkable serenity. She carried a wooden bowl and knelt in the garden, carefully harvesting leaves from several plants. Sensing his presence, she looked up, her expression neutral but not unwelcoming. "Good morning," Kem offered, keeping a respectful distance. "I apologize if I'm intruding." "All are welcome to observe," she replied, her voice soft yet clear, though these plants prefer gentle attention. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, selecting only certain leaves from each plant. "You are a healer?" Kem asked, recognizing some of the herbs from his own limited knowledge of medicinal plants. She considered this question longer than expected before answering. "I work with the body's wisdom, rather than against its messages," she said finally. "Some call this healing." She looked at him more directly now. "You carry questions within you. They create a particular quality around a person, a kind of openness that allows new understanding to enter." Kem felt a strange sensation, as if the ground beneath him had shifted slightly. Something about her perception felt significant, though he couldn't yet say why. "I've always had questions," he acknowledged, "more than I've found answers." She nodded, returning to her harvesting. "That is the natural order of things, though many try to reverse it. I am called Nefert. You are welcome to return when the sun begins its descent. The plants speak more clearly in the gentle light of evening. Throughout the rest of the day, Kem immersed himself in the rhythm of oasis life. He assisted a family repairing the mud bricks of their dwelling, the cool clay pleasant against his hands as he smoothed new material over weathered sections. Later, he sat with several children who were weaving small baskets from palm fronds, their nimble fingers creating intricate patterns with practiced ease. They laughed at his clumsier attempts, but patiently showed him the proper technique again and again. The afternoon heat eventually drove everyone to seek shade. Kem found a spot beneath a cluster of palms, their fronds creating a dappled pattern of light and shadow on the ground. He laid his cloak on the sand and stretched out, feeling the contrast between the hot air and the relatively cool earth beneath him. Above, the palm fronds rustled softly in the occasional breeze, their movement hypnotic and soothing. This peaceful interlude allowed Kem to reflect on his journey. For several years now, he had been traveling from place to place, learning what he could from those willing to teach, offering his own growing knowledge where it might be useful. The wandering life suited his temperament. He enjoyed the constant newness, the freedom to follow his curiosity, the endless variations in landscape and custom throughout the great kingdom. Yet lately, a different quality had entered his wandering. Where once he had moved primarily from interest or opportunity, now he felt drawn towards something specific yet unnamed. It was this feeling that had pulled him westward, away from the fertile valley and toward the deep desert, a persistent sense that something awaited him beyond the mapped and known regions of the kingdom. As the fierce heat of midday gradually softened, the oasis reawakened. Kem watched an elderly craftsman carefully carving a piece of wood, his gnarled hands moving with surprising precision. Nearby, two young men practiced a wrestling form, their movements both athletic and graceful as they exchanged holds and counters in a choreographed dance. A group of women sat in a circle, grinding grain between stones while their voices rose and fell in a working song whose melody seemed to ripple across the water. These simple activities, performed with presence and care, created a harmony that Kem found deeply satisfying. Each person engaged in their task with a quality of attention that transformed ordinary work into something approaching the sacred. This, he reflected, was something he had noticed more in smaller communities and remote temples. This capacity to infuse daily actions with meaning and awareness. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Kem remembered the invitations he had received. The question was which to accept first, the elders beneath the acacia tree, or the mysterious healer in her circular dwelling. As if in answer, he felt a gentle tug of interest toward the western edge of the settlement. The healer's garden would be his first visit then. With this decision made, he rose and began walking toward the circular house, curious about what insights might await. The evening light painted everything in warm gold as Kem approached the healer's dwelling. The garden surrounding the circular house seemed even more vibrant now, with several flowers opening their petals to the gentler rays of the setting sun. Subtle fragrances filled the air, the sharp clarity of mint, the complex sweetness of jasmine, the earthy richness of sage. These scents mingled with the background aroma of warm sand and distant cooking fires, creating an atmosphere that felt both alerting and calming. Nefert sat on a simple wooden stool at the garden's edge, grinding something in a stone mortar with steady, rhythmic movements. She acknowledged Kem's approach with a slight nod, but continued her work, the pestle making a soft, regular sound against the stone. Without looking up, she gestured to another stool nearby. As Kem settled himself, he noticed details about the healer that had escaped his earlier observation. Although her movements were unhurried, there was nothing hesitant or weak about them. Each motion conveyed precision and purpose. The lines in her face suggested years of expression, rather than merely age. Laugh lines around her eyes, thoughtful creases across her forehead. Her hands, though marked by years of work, moved with the confident grace of someone entirely present in their activity. For several minutes they sat in companionable silence. Kem felt no urge to fill the quiet with words, sensing that speech would come when it was time. Instead, he allowed his awareness to expand, taking in the gradual transformation of the landscape as evening approached. The harsh contours of midday had softened into gentle curves and longer shadows. Birds called to one another as they returned to their nesting places. The temperature continued its gradual descent, bringing a comfortable coolness after the day's heat. "You feel it already," Nefert said finally, looking up from her work, the language beneath words. Kem considered this. "The desert speaks differently than the city," he offered. "There's more space between sounds here, more time to listen." She nodded, seeming pleased with his observation. "Most who come from the great cities bring their noise with them. Endless questions, constant movement, minds as crowded as market streets." She set aside her mortar and pestle. "But you have begun to empty yourself. This is good preparation." "Preparation for what?" Kem asked, feeling a flutter of anticipation in his chest. Nefert smiled slightly. "For whatever awaits beyond the horizon that has been calling you." When she saw his surprised expression, she continued, "It is not difficult to see. Your eyes frequently turn westward, even when you're engaged in other activities. Something pulls you toward the deep desert." Kem felt a peculiar sensation, the slight disorientation that comes when someone perceives something about us that we've only partially acknowledged ourselves. "Yes," he admitted, "though I can't explain what or why. It feels important, necessary even, but..." He gestured vaguely, unable to articulate the feeling more precisely. "The most significant journeys often begin this way," Nefert said, "with a calling rather than a map." She studied him for a moment. "What do you know of the Ancient One who watches over the western desert?" Kem's pulse quickened slightly. "The Great Sphinx. I've heard stories since childhood. The guardian, with a lion's body and human face, carved from living rock in times beyond memory. Some say it was created by the gods themselves before humans walked the Nile Valley. Those are the tales told in busy marketplaces," Nefert acknowledged. "There are older stories, quieter ones, passed between those who work with deeper knowledge. These stories speak of the Sphinx not merely as a monument or guardian, but as a keeper of riddles that unlock the gates between worlds." As she spoke, Kem felt a curious resonance, as if her words were touching something already present within him. The sensation was both comforting and slightly unsettling. Recognition mingled with mystery. His breathing deepened naturally as he listened, his body relaxing further into the wooden stool beneath him. "Since ancient times," Nefert continued, "certain individuals have felt called to journey to the Sphinx, not as common travelers but as seekers. They go not to observe its grandeur but to listen, to place themselves before its enigmatic gaze and receive what comes." She looked directly at Kem now. "It seems you may be such a seeker, whether you knew it until now or not." Kem felt a wave of something like recognition washing through him, a sense that scattered fragments of his life were suddenly revealing a pattern he hadn't previously perceived. His years of wandering, his persistent questions, his comfort with mystery rather than certainty, all seemed to have been preparing him for something he couldn't have named until this moment. "How would one approach such a journey?" he asked, his voice softer now, matching the hushed quality that had entered their conversation. "With emptiness rather than expectation," Nefert replied. "The Sphinx does not offer answers to those who arrive full of their own knowledge. It is said to speak in riddles, that confound the thinking mind, but awaken deeper understanding. As she spoke, the last direct rays of sunlight slipped below the horizon, leaving the sky awash in deepening shades of orange and purple. The first evening star appeared, bright and clear in the darkening blue. A gentle breeze stirred the garden plants, carrying their mingled fragrances toward the two figures seated in growing twilight. "There is a route known to few," Nefert said after a thoughtful pause. "Not the common road taken by officials and merchants, but an older path that follows the ancient watercourse that once flowed where now only sand remains. It would take perhaps 5 days of careful travel, following specific stars and landmarks." She studied him carefully. "If this journey is truly yours to make, I can share this knowledge with you." Kem felt a strange mixture of excitement and peacefulness spreading through his body. The recognition of something important, combined with a deep sense that all was unfolding exactly as it should. His breathing had become slow and regular, his awareness simultaneously sharp and relaxed, in the way that sometimes came during his morning movement practices. "I would be grateful for your guidance," he said simply. Nefert nodded, seemingly satisfied with both his decision and his manner of expressing it. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow I will show you the preparations needed for such a journey. Not merely water and food, but preparations of the mind and spirit as well. The desert crossing requires readiness on all levels." As their conversation concluded, the sounds of evening filled the comfortable silence between them. The soft hooting of an owl beginning its night hunt, the distant laughter of children finishing their day's play, the gentle percussion of someone tapping rhythm on a small drum somewhere in the settlement. These sounds formed a natural music that seemed to complement the emerging stars overhead. Kem remained seated for some time, allowing the implications of their conversation to settle within him. The idea of journeying to the Great Sphinx, not as a casual visitor, but as someone responding to a deeper calling, both confirmed his unnamed feelings and opened new questions. Yet these questions didn't create restlessness as they might have in the past. Instead, they seemed to invite a deeper listening, a willingness to proceed without needing every step illuminated in advance. As full darkness embraced the oasis, Nefert lit a small oil lamp, its warm glow creating a sphere of soft light around them. The flame's gentle movement cast living shadows that seemed to dance among the garden plants. "One more thing before you seek your rest," she said. "The journey to the Sphinx begins long before your feet touch the path. From this moment forward, pay particular attention to your dreams. They may offer guidance that your waking mind cannot perceive." With these words, she rose from her stool, signaling the end of their conversation. Kem stood as well, feeling both lighter and somehow more substantial than when he had arrived. He thanked her with a gesture that conveyed more than words could express, then made his way back toward the center of the oasis, where he had prepared a simple sleeping place beneath the stars. As he walked, he noticed how his perception had subtly shifted since their conversation. The night seemed more alive, more present. Each sound registered with unusual clarity. The soft crunch of sand beneath his sandals, the rustling of palm fronds high above, the whispered conversations from nearby dwellings. The star-filled sky felt simultaneously vast and intimate, stretching to infinity, yet close enough to touch. His body moved with a natural grace, each step placed with unconscious precision on the sand path. That night, as Cam settled onto his sleeping mat, he gazed up at the stars that would soon guide his journey westward. The familiar constellations seemed to shimmer with new significance, as if they had been waiting all along for him to perceive their true purpose. His breathing gradually slowed, deepening into the natural rhythm that precedes sleep. Soraya's conversations replayed briefly in his mind, not as worries or planning, but as gentle echoes gradually fading into the greater silence of night. As consciousness began to drift, Cam had the distinct sensation of something vast and ancient turning its attention toward him across the desert expanse, a benevolent awareness that had been watching patiently through countless human lifetimes. This perception didn't create fear, but rather a profound sense of rightness and belonging. Whatever awaited at his journey's end had been waiting not just for him personally, but for anyone ready to approach with the proper spirit of openness and respect. With this comforting awareness, Cam released into sleep, his body completely relaxed against the earth that had supported countless generations of seekers before him. His last conscious sensation was of gentle weightlessness, as if he were floating on the invisible currents of night while remaining perfectly grounded beneath the eternal stars. Dawn came with a freshness that seemed to wash the world clean. Cam woke feeling unusually rested, his mind clear and alert despite the significance of the day ahead. The morning air carried a slight coolness that would soon yield to the day's growing heat, and with it, the beginning of his journey toward the Sphinx. After his morning rituals, Cam returned to Nefert's dwelling. She was already awake and seemed to have been expecting him. A small bundle of provisions sat near her door, a water skin made from goat hide, a pouch of dried dates and nuts, flatbread wrapped in linen, and several small packets of what appeared to be herbs. "These will sustain your body," she said, indicating the food and water. "These," she continued, pointing to the herb packets, "will help maintain clarity during your journey. One small pinch each morning, steeped in water before the sun rises. They will help you remain alert to both outer landmarks and inner signals." Cam accepted these gifts with gratitude, tucking them carefully into his own travel pouch. Nefer then unrolled a piece of papyrus on which she had drawn a simple map, not with the precise measurements favored by royal architects, but with symbolic representations of landscape features and celestial alignments. "The first day's journey follows the old dried riverbed," she explained, her finger tracing a winding line on the papyrus. "Though no water has flowed there in living memory, the land still remembers. You'll notice a subtle depression in the sand and certain plants that grow nowhere else in the desert. Follow this path until sunset, then look for a formation of 3 stones that resemble a bird in flight." Her instructions continued, describing landmarks for each day's travel. A solitary acacia tree on the second day, an unusual red-streaked cliff on the third, a circular arrangement of stones on the fourth. Throughout, she emphasized the importance of traveling during early morning and late afternoon, resting during the most intense midday heat beneath whatever shelter could be found or created. "On the 5th day," she concluded, "you will see the plateau rising in the distance. The Sphinx faces the rising sun, so approach from the west with the sun at your back. When you first glimpse it on the horizon, stop and wait. Do not proceed immediately, regardless of the time of day. Sit in stillness until you feel invited to continue." Cam absorbed these instructions, recognizing that they contained a wisdom beyond mere practical guidance. The way Nefert spoke of the journey suggested it was as much an inner passage as a physical crossing of the desert. Her emphasis on waiting, observing, and listening revealed an approach to sacred sites very different from the busy activity of official temple ceremonies he had witnessed in Thebes. "There is one more preparation," Nefert said, reaching for a small alabaster jar. "Close your eyes." When Kem complied, he felt her thumb press gently against his forehead, just above the bridge of his nose. The substance she applied felt cool at first, then created a subtle warming sensation that spread across his brow. A complex aroma rose to his nostrils, something mineral and ancient, mingled with herbs he could not identify. "This oil has been prepared with materials gathered from the base of the Sphinx itself," she explained as he opened his eyes. "It helps create resonance between the seeker and the sought. Repeat this anointing each morning before beginning your day's journey." With the practical preparations complete, Nefert led Kem to the very edge of the oasis, where green life gave way to the vast emptiness of the desert. The morning sun illuminated the landscape before them, rolling dunes interspersed with rocky outcroppings stretching westward toward the distant horizon. The sight might have appeared forbidding to some, but to Kem, it held a stark beauty and a sense of invitation. "Remember," Nefert said as they gazed across the sand sea, "the greatest preparation is emptiness. The questions that await you cannot enter a vessel already filled with expectations or desired outcomes. Travel with an open hand, rather than a closed fist." With these words and a simple blessing gesture, she bid him farewell. Kem secured his modest provisions, took a final deep breath of the fragrant oasis air, and stepped forward onto the desert path that would lead him westward. The sand felt firm beneath his sandals, still cool from the night, but already beginning to warm with the rising sun. As the oasis receded behind him, Kem found himself entering a different relationship with the landscape. Without the constant activity and sounds of human settlement, his senses seemed to expand and sharpen. The subtle contours of the terrain became more apparent, gentle rises and depressions, variations in sand color and texture, the occasional hardy plant somehow finding sustenance in the seemingly barren ground. The ancient riverbed Nefert had described was indeed visible once he knew to look for it, a long, winding depression where the sand appeared slightly darker and more compacted. Small, tough shrubs with silvery leaves grew at irregular intervals along its course, their roots reaching deep for moisture that must still exist far below the surface. Kem followed this natural pathway, maintaining a steady, unhurried pace that he knew could be sustained throughout the day. As the sun climbed higher, the desert began to reveal its subtle music, the soft whisper of sand shifting in the light breeze, the occasional call of a desert lark, the rhythmic sound of his own footsteps and breathing, creating a personal percussion against the background silence. These sounds didn't disturb the profound quiet of the landscape, but rather seemed to emphasize it, like sparse notes that highlight the spaces between them. By midday, the heat had intensified significantly. Following Nefert's advice, Kem found a rocky outcropping that provided a thin strip of shade. He spread his cloak on the ground and settled into this modest shelter, rationing a careful sip of water from his skin. The sudden stillness after hours of walking created its own kind of movement, a turning inward, an awareness of his body's response to the journey thus far. He noticed the pleasant fatigue in his legs, the gentle sheen of perspiration on his skin, the slight dryness in his throat, despite his careful hydration. These sensations weren't uncomfortable, but rather felt like appropriate communications from a body engaged in purposeful effort. His breathing had established a deep, steady rhythm that continued even at rest, providing constant renewal with each inhale and release. With each exhale, as he sat in the thin shade, Kem observed the landscape around him with quiet attention. From a distance, the desert might appear lifeless, but close observation revealed a subtle ecosystem adapted to these extreme conditions. Tiny tracks in the sand evidenced the nocturnal journeys of small creatures. A lizard watched him warily from behind a sun-baked stone, its scaled skin reflecting light like burnished copper. High overhead, a solitary hawk rode the thermal currents, its sharp eyes missing nothing below. When the most intense heat began to wane, Kem continued his journey, following the ancient riverbed as it wound through the increasingly rugged terrain. The quality of light was changing now, the harsh white brilliance of midday softening into the warmer, more golden illumination of late afternoon. This light revealed textures and contours in the landscape that had been bleached out during the day's peak heat, creating a visual richness that complemented the cooler air now reaching his skin. As the sun approached the western horizon, its lower angle created longer shadows that stretched eastward from every rock and dune. Kem began looking for the formation Nefert had described, 3 stones resembling a bird in flight. The landmarks in this stark landscape held different significance than those in settled regions. In the city, one navigated by human constructions. Here, every natural feature became meaningful, a conversation between Earth and traveler that required careful attention. When he finally spotted the formation, just as the sun touched the horizon, Kem felt a quiet satisfaction. The 3 weather-worn boulders, when viewed from his approach angle, indeed suggested a bird with outstretched wings rising from the desert floor. He made his camp in their shadow, creating a small protected space, with his cloak stretched between 2 of the stones. As darkness fell across the desert, the temperature dropped rapidly. Kem wrapped himself in his second cloak, grateful for its warmth. Above him, the night sky revealed itself in stages. First, the brightest stars appearing against the deepening blue, then clusters and constellations emerging as true darkness settled, and finally, the full glory of the Milky Way stretching across the black dome overhead, a river of light to complement the dry riverbed he had followed throughout the day. The vastness above might have made him feel small and insignificant, yet Kem experienced a curious expansion instead. Something about the desert's emptiness and the sky's fullness created a perfect balance, allowing him to feel simultaneously humble and connected to something immeasurable. His breathing deepened naturally in response to this perception, his body relaxing more completely into the sand that had absorbed the day's heat, and now released it gradually through the cool night before allowing himself to drift toward sleep. Kem recalled Nefert's instruction to pay particular attention to his dreams. He consciously released expectations about what might come, creating space for whatever messages might arise from deeper levels of awareness. As consciousness began to fade, he maintained a gentle vigilance, not tense or demanding, but receptively alert, like still water ready to receive a falling leaf. His last waking sensation was of profound peace, a rightness about his position in this exact place, under these particular stars, at this specific moment in time. Whatever lay ahead on the journey, this present experience was complete in itself, requiring nothing more to justify its value. With this awareness, Kem released into sleep, his breathing slow and deep, his body heavy against the desert sand, his mind quietly receptive to the dream wisdom that might come. The first night in the open desert brought dreams unlike any Kem had experienced before. He found himself walking through a landscape that was simultaneously familiar and strange. The same terrain he had traversed during the day, yet somehow more fluid. The boundaries between sand and sky, substance and space less clearly defined. In this dreamscape, the stars came lower, close enough that he could reach up and touch their cool fire with his fingertips. Each contact sent ripples of understanding through his being, though upon waking he could not articulate what he had learned. Dawn found him refreshed despite the hard ground that had been his bed. Following Nefer's instructions, he prepared a small infusion from one of the herb packets, allowing it to steep in water as the first light brightened the eastern horizon. The liquid took on a greenish-gold hue and emitted a subtle fragrance that reminded him simultaneously of sun-warmed stone and fresh leaves. When he sipped it, a gentle warmth spread from his center outward, bringing heightened clarity to his senses. The second day's journey began in this state of alert receptivity. Kem noticed even more detail in his surroundings. The precise pattern of small stones scattered across certain areas of sand, the nearly imperceptible tracks of desert creatures, the subtle variations in the quality of light as it reflected off different surfaces. Each observation came without commentary or analysis, simply registering in his awareness as part of the complete experience of the place. By mid-morning, the landscape began to change. The relatively flat terrain of the previous day gave way to more varied topography, shallow valleys between modest dunes, occasional rocky outcroppings that cast welcome shadows, areas where the sand displayed ripple patterns formed by wind rather than the ancient water flow he had been following. Kem navigated these changes with attention to the guidance Nefer had provided, maintaining his westward course while watching for the solitary acacia that would mark the day's significant landmark. As the sun reached its zenith, the heat intensified beyond what he had experienced the previous day. Even the occasional breeze felt warm against his skin, providing little relief. Kem found shelter in the shadow of a large rock formation, creating a small tent with his cloak to extend the shaded area. Here he rested, conserving both energy and water during the most challenging hours. In this profound stillness, with only the sound of his own breathing for company, Kem noticed a curious phenomenon. The boundary between inner and outer experience began to soften. The rhythm of his breath seemed to synchronize with the subtle movements in the air around him. The pulsing of his heart found correspondence in the way heat waves rose from the distant sand. His thoughts, when they arose, appeared to have the same quality as the occasional sounds that reached him, present for a moment, then dissolving back into the greater silence. When the worst heat began to subside, Kem continued his journey. The landscape now offered fewer distinctive features to guide him, requiring more careful attention to maintain his course. He found himself increasingly relying on an inner sense of direction that complemented his observations of the sun's position This faculty had always been present, but seemed heightened now, as if the desert's emptiness allowed this natural capacity to express itself more fully. Late in the afternoon, when the light had taken on the golden quality that preceded sunset, Kem spotted what he had been seeking: a single acacia tree rising from the desert floor, its umbrella-shaped canopy silhouetted against the sky. The tree stood alone in magnificent solitude, its very existence in this harsh environment a testament to perseverance and adaptation. As Kem approached, he saw that its trunk was gnarled and twisted by countless desert storms, yet still firmly rooted and supporting a spread of delicate leaves that created precious shade. He made camp beneath this natural shelter, feeling a kinship with the solitary tree. Like him, it existed at the boundary between worlds, not fully of the fertile valley nor entirely of the deep desert, but finding its place in the transition between these realms. As he sat with his back against its trunk, Kem felt a subtle vibration, as if the tree were communicating centuries of desert wisdom through direct physical contact. The night that followed brought deeper rest than the first. The tree's presence seemed to create a protected space where Kem's body could release completely into sleep, while his awareness remained gently receptive. His dreams this night had a different quality, less visual, but more deeply felt. He experienced himself as simultaneously small as a grain of sand and vast as the desert itself, shifting between perspectives with fluid ease. Through these shifting viewpoints came a growing sense that the boundaries he perceived in waking life were more permeable than he had previously understood. The third day dawned clear and still. After his morning preparation with the herb infusion, Kem bid farewell to the acacia tree with a gesture of gratitude and continued westward. According to Nefert's guidance, this day would bring him to a red-streaked cliff that marked the beginning of more rugged terrain, leading toward the distant plateau where the Sphinx kept its eternal vigil. The landscape indeed became more challenging as the day progressed. The relatively even sand sea gave way to a rockier surface with frequent changes in elevation. Kem found himself navigating shallow ravines and climbing modest rises, each requiring more effort than the previous day's walking. Yet his body seemed to have adapted to the journey's demands, finding a sustainable rhythm that allowed him to proceed without undue fatigue. Throughout this more strenuous travel, Kem maintained the quality of awareness that had been developing since his departure from the oasis. Each step came with full presence, each breath with complete attention. When thoughts arose about the journey's purpose or destination, he acknowledged them without attachment, allowing them to pass like clouds across the clear sky of his mind. The practice was not one of suppression, but of proper perspective, giving each experience its due importance without allowing any single element to dominate his awareness. By midday, a distinctive formation appeared on the horizon, a long cliff face with dramatic streaks of red mineral deposits, creating patterns against the predominantly golden stone. This landmark, exactly as Nefert had described, confirmed both his course and her knowledge of this seemingly trackless region. Kem felt a renewed appreciation for the lineage of desert wisdom she represented, maintained through countless generations, despite the shifting political powers in the valley. Beyond, the cliff provided excellent shelter for his midday rest, its shadow creating a cool sanctuary from the relentless sun. Seated on a smooth stone at its base, Kem sipped sparingly from his water skin and ate a few dried dates, allowing there concentrated sweetness to dissolve slowly on his tongue. The cliff face before him displayed its red patterns like an ancient text, lines and whorls that seemed almost like writing if viewed with the right perspective. As he sat in contemplation of these patterns, Kem became aware of a subtle shift in his perception. The red streaks appeared to pulse slightly, with a rhythm matching his heartbeat. When he adjusted his focus, the effect disappeared, yet returned when he relaxed his gaze. This phenomenon didn't create alarm, but rather interest. Another instance of the boundary between observer and observed becoming less rigid than conventional understanding suggested. When he resumed his journey in the late afternoon, Kem carried this experience with him, not as a conclusion or belief, but as a question worth holding with gentle attention. The terrain beyond the cliff became increasingly varied, with wind-carved stone formations creating a landscape that resembled a city built by nature rather than human hands. Walking among these natural sculptures required careful navigation, yet also provided frequent shade and protection from the occasional gusts that now swept across the rocky ground. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Kem found a protected hollow among several large boulders that would serve well as his shelter for the night. The enclosed space created a natural amphitheater that somehow captured the day's residual warmth while offering protection from the sharpening night wind. He arranged his simple camp, then climbed to a higher vantage point to observe the sunset. The view from this elevation offered his first glimpse of what lay ahead. Far in the distance, barely discernible on the horizon, a darker line suggested the edge of a plateau rising from the desert floor. Though too far to make out specific features, Kem knew this must be his destination, the elevated land where the Sphinx had watched over the desert for countless generations. The sight brought a quiet excitement, not of imminent arrival but of confirmed direction. The sunset itself was spectacular from this height, the sun transforming into a massive red disk as it approached the horizon, casting a warm glow across the rocky landscape that emphasized every texture and contour. As it finally slipped below the western edge of the world, a brief green flash colored the sky, followed by rapidly spreading purples and deep blues that announced night's approach. Kem descended to his sheltered hollow as darkness fell. The nearly full moon rose soon after sunset, casting silver light across the stone formations and creating a landscape transformed by shadow and illumination. This natural sanctuary felt especially protected, as if the arrangement of stones had been deliberately created to offer comfort to desert travelers. As he settled onto his sleeping mat, Kem felt a deepening stillness both around and within him. The day's journey had required physical effort, yet he felt energized rather than depleted. His breathing found an effortless depth, each exhale releasing slightly more tension from his body. The sounds of the desert night, the occasional whisper of wind through stone passages, the distant call of a night bird, the subtle settling of sand created a gentle lullaby that complemented his growing stillness. This night's dreams had yet another quality. Neither the symbolic landscape of the first night nor the perspective shifts of the second, but a direct encounter with presence. In this dream state, Kem found himself seated before a being that appeared simultaneously as a lion, a human, and pure light. No words were exchanged, yet communication flowed between them, bypassing language entirely. Upon waking, He could not recall specific content from this exchange, only the profound sensation of having been truly seen and recognized by something ancient and wise. Morning came with unusual clarity. The herb infusion seemed almost unnecessary, as Kem's awareness was already crystalline and alert upon waking. The dream encounter had left him with a sense of anticipation tempered by deep calm, eagerness without anxiety, purpose without strain. As he continued his journey westward across the increasingly rocky terrain, each step felt both ordinary and significant, part of a natural progression toward something that had always been waiting. The fourth day brought new challenges and deepening awareness. The terrain continued its transformation from sand sea to stone landscape, with smooth rock surfaces alternating with areas of loose scree that required careful footing. Kem navigated these changes with increasing confidence, finding that his body adapted intuitively to each new surface. His steps became lighter on unstable ground, more firmly planted on solid stone, all without conscious calculation. According to Nefert's guidance, this day would bring him to a circular arrangement of stones, not a natural formation, but one created by human hands in times beyond memory. Finding this landmark would confirm that the final approach to the plateau lay directly ahead. With this knowledge guiding his course, Kem maintained a steady westward path, adjusting only to navigate around impassable features of the landscape. The midday heat seemed less oppressive in this rockier terrain. Stone absorbed and reflected the sun's energy differently than sand, creating pockets of varying temperature that Kem could detect as he moved through the landscape. He chose a north-facing cliff base for his rest period, where the shade remained cool and deep throughout the day's hottest hours. Seated on smooth stone, worn by countless years of wind and occasional rain, he consumed a modest portion of his provisions and conserved his remaining water. During this period of rest, Kem noticed a shift in his thought patterns. Where previously his mind might have been occupied with memories of places visited or plans for future travel, now his awareness rested more fully in immediate experience, each sensation registered with unusual clarity. The cool stone against his back, the subtle texture of air entering his lungs, the play of light and shadow across the ground before him. When thoughts of past or future arose, they passed through his awareness without capturing his attention, like birds flying across the sky without disturbing its vast expanse. This quality of presence continued as he resumed his journey in the late afternoon. The rocky landscape took on new beauty in the angled light, with every crevice and contour emphasized by shadow. Colors intensified, the predominant tans and golds deepening to amber and bronze, occasional minerals gleaming white or red or green against the neutral background. Even the sky seemed more vibrant, its blue deepening toward the zenith, while retaining clarity along the horizon. As the sun began its descent toward the western edge of the world, Kem spotted what he had been seeking, a perfect circle of stones, each about waist height, arranged with obvious intention on a flat area of rocky ground. The formation was clearly ancient, the stones weathered by countless years of exposure, yet their deliberate placement remained unmistakable. Someone, in a time perhaps beyond current memory, had created this marker for travelers following this same path. Approaching the stone circle, Kem felt a subtle shift in the quality of the air, as if the space within the arrangement operated under slightly different conditions than the surrounding landscape. The sensation wasn't dramatic, but registered as a gentle change in pressure or density that he experienced both on his skin and in his breathing. Without questioning or analyzing this perception, he simply noted it as another aspect of his unfolding journey. The circle contained exactly 12 stones of similar size, spaced at equal intervals to create a perfect perimeter. At the center stood a 13th stone, taller than the others and marked with faint carvings nearly eroded by time and weather. Kem approached this central marker with respect, recognizing it as an intentional communication from the distant past to the present moment. Though most of the carvings had faded beyond recognition, one symbol remained partially visible, a simplified rendering of what appeared to be the Sphinx itself, the distinctive profile of lion body and human head, recognizable despite its weathered condition. Beneath this image, barely discernible lines suggested directional indicators pointing westward toward the plateau, now clearly visible on the horizon. As sunset approached, Kem made a decision that felt right without requiring analysis. Rather than continuing to a different location for his night's camp, he would stay within this stone circle, sleeping at its center near the carved marker. He prepared his simple camp as golden light bathed the ancient stones, creating long shadows that rotated slowly around the circle's perimeter. When darkness fell completely, the nearly full moon rose to illuminate the landscape in silver light. Kem noticed something he might have missed in daylight. The arrangement of the 12 perimeter stones corresponded to the major constellations visible in the night sky. From his central position, he could see how each stone aligned with a particular star group when viewed from the circle's center. The precision of this ancient astronomical knowledge impressed him deeply, creating another connection to those who had traveled this path in times long past. Sleep came easily in this protected space, a deep rest that felt somehow supported by the stone arrangement surrounding him. His dreams this night were extraordinarily vivid, filled with images of construction, massive stones being moved with precision, great monuments rising from bedrock, knowledge of proportion and alignment being applied through techniques he couldn't fully comprehend upon waking. Throughout these dreams ran a consistent theme of purpose and cosmic alignment, of human activity harmonizing with larger patterns of creation. Dawn within the stone circle brought a moment of perfect stillness. As the first light touched the eastern horizon, the circle's arrangement created a particular pattern of illumination and shadow. The central marker cast its shadow precisely between two of the perimeter stones, indicating the direct path toward the western plateau, now clearly visible in the growing light. This final confirmation of his route felt like a blessing from the circle's ancient creators, a connection across time through shared purpose. After completing his morning ritual with the herb infusion, Kem departed the stone circle with gratitude, following the direction indicated by the central marker's shadow. The fifth and final day of his desert crossing would bring him to the plateau's edge, and his first sight of the Sphinx itself. According to Nefert's instructions, this approach required particular awareness and respect, not rushing forward upon first sighting, but waiting until an inner invitation was felt. The terrain leading toward the plateau presented the journey's most challenging landscape. The relatively flat desert floor began to rise in a series of natural steps and terraces, requiring more strenuous climbing than previous days' travel. Yet Kem found his body well prepared for these demands. responding with strength and agility that seemed to have developed throughout the journey. Each upward section brought new perspectives on the landscape behind him and clearer views of what lay ahead. By mid-morning, having ascended several significant rises, Kem could clearly see the plateau's edge, a dramatic limestone cliff rising abruptly from the desert floor. From this distance, the plateau appeared as a massive natural pedestal, elevated above the surrounding landscape as if intentionally positioned to support something of great significance. Though he could not yet see the Sphinx itself, Kem knew it awaited somewhere on that elevated surface, gazing eternally eastward toward the rising sun. The final approach required careful navigation around massive boulders that had broken from the plateau's edge over countless years, creating a complex landscape of stone passages and mini canyons leading toward the main ascent. Rather than appearing as obstacles, these features felt to Kem like a natural entranceway, a transitional space between the open desert and the sacred ground ahead. As midday heat intensified, he found shelter within one of these stone passageways, a narrow canyon where shade remained consistent throughout the day. The limestone walls surrounding him felt noticeably different from the rocks he had encountered earlier in his journey, smoother, slightly cooler to the touch, with occasional embedded fossils of ancient sea creatures, suggesting this entire plateau had once been beneath water in the deep past. Seated in this protected space, Kem entered a particularly deep meditation. His breathing slowed to profound calmness, each inhale bringing cooling energy throughout his body, each exhale releasing any remaining tension or effort. In this state of receptive stillness, he became aware of subtle vibrations coming through the stone itself, as if the entire plateau were humming with barely perceptible sound. This perception didn't strike him as strange, but rather as natural, another layer of communication becoming available as his own awareness refined. When the most intense heat began to subside, Kem continued his approach. The pathway gradually inclined upward more steeply, eventually bringing him to a natural ramp of solid limestone that led directly to the plateau's edge. This final ascent required deliberate focus on each step, the smooth stone offering less secure footing than the textured surfaces below. Yet there was joy in this careful movement, a satisfaction in the body's adaptation to the landscape's changing demands. As he neared the top of this natural ramp, Kem remembered Nefert's specific instruction. Upon first sighting the Sphinx, he was to stop and wait, proceeding only when he felt an inner invitation to continue. With this guidance in mind, he slowed his pace as he approached the plateau's edge, preparing himself for whatever might come into view. The moment of first sighting exceeded all expectation. As Kem crested the ramp and the plateau's surface came into view, the Sphinx appeared in profile against the late afternoon sky, immense beyond imagining, its lion body stretched in eternal repose, its human face gazing eastward with an expression of serene awareness that had witnessed the passage of countless generations. Though still at considerable distance, the monument's presence was overwhelming, a perfect integration of natural stone and human vision, manifested at a scale that altered perception itself. Following Nefert's guidance, Kem stopped immediately, finding a flat stone surface just below the plateau's edge. He seated himself, facing the distant figure. From this vantage point, the Sphinx was continuously visible, yet at a distance that felt respectful. allowing him to absorb its presence, gradually rather than approaching too quickly. Here he would wait, for minutes or hours or however long might be necessary, until the proper moment to continue revealed itself. As the sun continued its westward journey, eventually positioning itself behind the Sphinx from Kem's perspective, the monument's appearance transformed. Backlit by golden light, its silhouette gained definition while its details softened. This changing perspective revealed something Kem hadn't initially noticed: the perfect alignment of the figure with certain landscape features beyond it, creating a composed image that connected earth and sky through the monument's proportions. Seated in receptive stillness, Kem allowed his breathing to synchronize naturally with subtle rhythms he perceived in his surroundings. Each inhale seemed to connect him more deeply to the plateau beneath him, each exhale to expand his awareness outward toward the monumental figure in the distance. Time began to shift in his perception, stretching and contracting in waves that corresponded to no external measurement, but some deeper pattern he could feel rather than understand. As the sun approached the horizon behind the Sphinx, something extraordinary occurred. The angle of light created a momentary alignment where the sun appeared perfectly positioned above the monument's head, creating what looked like a crown of golden light. In this precise moment, Kem felt a distinct shift within, not a voice or vision, but an unmistakable invitation, a drawing forward that originated not from his own desire, but from the relationship now established between himself, Dwarf, and the ancient guardian. With this clear inner signal, Kem rose from his seated position and began walking forward across the plateau surface. His movements felt both deliberate and effortless, each step connecting firmly with the limestone beneath, while his awareness remained expanded toward the increasingly imposing figure ahead. The plateau itself seemed to support his approach, the slight inclinations and depressions in its surface, guiding his path naturally toward his destination. As distance decreased, the Sphinx's tremendous scale became even more apparent. Carved from a natural outcropping of limestone, the figure emerged from the living rock of the plateau as if it had always been present, merely waiting for skilled hands to reveal its form. The craftsmanship visible even from this distance suggested knowledge beyond ordinary human capacity. Perfect proportions, harmonious integration with the natural stone, an expression that somehow conveyed both power and compassion simultaneously. The sun had nearly touched the horizon when Kem reached a point that felt intuitively correct for his first pause, still at respectful distance, but close enough now to fully appreciate the monument's presence. Here he stopped, standing in quiet reverence before the figure that had drawn him across the desert. The Sphinx's gaze, directed eternally eastward, didn't fall upon him directly, yet he felt profoundly seen nonetheless, recognized by an awareness that operated beyond ordinary perception. As twilight deepened around him, Kem prepared a simple camp in this sacred space. His movements were unhurried and deliberate, each action performed with full awareness, as if it were part of a ceremony. When darkness fully embraced the plateau, the rising moon illuminated the Sphinx with silver light that emphasized different aspects than the day's golden sun, softening some features while accentuating others, revealing textures in the ancient stone invisible in daylight. That night, seated before his small fire with the monumental figure visible in moonlight, beyond, Kem felt a deepening stillness, unlike anything he had previously experienced. His breathing became extraordinarily slow and deep, each cycle seeming to connect him more fully to both earth below and sky above. Thoughts, when they arose, appeared as gentle ripples across a vast, calm lake, momentarily visible then, dissolving back into the greater peace. Sleep, when it eventually came, arrived not as unconsciousness, but as a shift in perception, a transitional state where waking awareness and dream consciousness overlapped and interpenetrated. In this liminal space, Kem experienced direct communion with the Sphinx, not as stone monument, but as living presence, ancient beyond human reckoning, yet immediately accessible in the eternal now. No words were exchanged, no images processed through ordinary understanding, yet communication flowed freely in a language that spoke directly to his deepest awareness. When morning light gradually returned, Kem found himself seated in exactly the position where he had begun his meditation the previous evening. His body felt simultaneously rested and energized, as if he had accessed a source of renewal beyond physical sleep. The Sphinx before him, now illuminated by the rising sun that met its eternal gaze directly, seemed to glow with inner light, the limestone absorbing and reflecting the day's first rays in a manner that emphasized its living quality despite its stone substance. With the new day, Kem understood that his approach would continue, not through physical movement now, but through deepening receptivity. He had been called across the desert, not merely to observe the Sphinx, but to enter into relationship with the wisdom it embodied. This relationship would develop through the riddles that Nefert had mentioned, not ordinary questions with fixed answers, but invitations to perception beyond conventional understanding. As the sun cleared the horizon, fully illuminating the Sphinx's face, Kem felt the first riddle arise within his awareness, not as words, but as a direct questioning of perception itself. What sees without eyes? What knows without thought? What remains unchanged while witnessing all change? These inquiries didn't require verbal response, but rather invited him to experience directly what they pointed toward. The unchanging awareness that existed prior to all concepts and forms. Seated in perfect stillness before the ancient monument, Kem allowed these questions to work within him, neither pursuing answers nor rejecting the inquiry, but providing space for direct understanding to emerge in its own time. His breathing continued its deep, steady rhythm, each exhale releasing him more completely into present experience, each inhale refreshing his capacity for clear perception. Time passed without measurement. As Kem remained in this receptive state, the sun climbed higher, warming the limestone plateau beneath him and intensifying the play of light and shadow across the Sphinx's massive form. Birds occasionally passed overhead, their calls brief counterpoints to the profound silence that enveloped this sacred space. These simple perceptions registered in his awareness without disturbance, each sensation arising and passing naturally, while the witnessing presence remained unchanged. As midday approached with its increased heat, Kem felt a second riddle emerge into awareness. What moves without changing position? What speaks without sound? What teaches without instruction? Again, these inquiries came not as verbal formulations, but as direct invitations to experience beyond ordinary knowing. They seemed to emerge not from his own thinking, but from the relationship now established between himself and the ancient guardian before him. Throughout the day, this process continued, periods of complete stillness, giving way to subtle movements of awareness, questions emerging not to be answered, but to be lived into. Each riddle created a space where conventional understanding fell away, allowing direct perception of what existed prior to and beyond all concepts. This was not an intellectual exercise, but a gradual unwinding of habitual perception, revealing layer by layer the true nature that had always been present beneath accumulated patterns of thought and belief. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, now positioned behind Kem and illuminating the Sphinx directly, he felt a final riddle arise, perhaps the most profound of all. What remains when all questions cease? What knows itself through all experiences? What is never born, yet gives birth to all manifestation? In the space created by these inquiries, something shifted fundamentally in Kem's perception. The boundary between observer and observed, seeker and sought, self and other dissolved completely, revealing a unity that had never actually been absent, merely obscured by conceptual division. In this recognition, Kem experienced what the Sphinx had been silently teaching throughout countless generations. The timeless awareness that witnesses all change while remaining itself unchanged. The presence that experiences all manifestation while itself transcending form. This was not a concept to be understood, but a reality to be recognized. Not something new to be attained, but the ancient foundation finally acknowledged. As sunset painted the plateau in golden light once more, Kem remained seated in profound peace, his body perfectly still, yet filled with vibrant energy, his mind completely quiet, yet luminously aware. The journey that had led him across the desert to this monument had been simultaneously a physical crossing and an inner passage, each step on the outer path corresponding to a movement of consciousness toward its own source. The Sphinx, massive and silent before him, continued its eternal gaze eastward toward the next sunrise and all sunrises to come. Yet in another sense, Kem recognized that its gaze had always been directed inward as well, pointing toward the timeless awareness that constitutes the true identity of all beings. This dual direction, outward toward manifestation and inward toward source, represented the final teaching, the integration of form and emptiness, relative and absolute, human and divine. Night fell once more across the plateau, stars emerging in breathtaking profusion above the ancient monument. Kem remained awake throughout these hours, not from effort or intention, but from the natural alertness that arises when awareness recognizes its own nature. Sleep was no longer necessary in the conventional sense, as each moment provided both rest and renewal through direct contact with the source of all energy and life. When the eastern horizon began to lighten with the promise of a new day, Kem understood that his time before the Sphinx was reaching its natural conclusion. The journey had fulfilled its purpose, not through arrival at a final destination, but through the recognition that had been its true aim all along. The ancient guardian had offered its riddles, not as obstacles to overcome, but as doorways to pass through, each opening to more expanded recognition. With the first rays of morning light touching the Sphinx's face once more, Kem rose from his seated position. His body, despite 2 days without conventional sleep or significant food, felt energized and perfectly balanced. Each movement came with natural grace, neither hurried nor hesitant, but expressing the same timeless presence he had recognized as his essential nature. With a gesture of profound gratitude toward the monumental figure, he turned and began walking toward the plateau's edge, ready to carry this recognition back to the world of ordinary activity. The descent from the plateau unfolded with the same quality of consciousness that had characterized his time with the Sphinx. Each step connected fully with the ground beneath. Each breath circulated fresh energy throughout his body. Each perception registered clearly, without creating disturbance in the underlying peace. The journey back would follow a slightly different route, not the gradual approach through the stone circle, but a more direct path that Kem now perceived with intuitive clarity. As he navigated the landscape with this renewed perception, Kem understood that the relationship established with the Sphinx would continue regardless of the physical proximity. The recognition that had occurred on the plateau was not dependent on location, but was available in every moment and circumstance. The ancient guardian remained not only on its stone pedestal, but within the awareness that had recognized its deeper significance. The return journey through the desert unfolded with remarkable ease, where the westward crossing had required careful navigation and constant attention to landmarks. The eastward return seemed to flow naturally, as if the path were revealing itself without effort. Kem moved at a steady pace, his body finding perfect balance between exertion and conservation, his perception remaining clear and expanded throughout each day's travel. The landscape itself appeared transformed through his renewed vision. Details previously unnoticed now revealed themselves with perfect clarity. The precise patterning of stones across certain areas, the subtle color variations in sand and rock, the nearly invisible tracks of desert creatures moving at night. These perceptions didn't require searching or analysis, but simply registered in his awareness as part of the complete experience of each moment. During midday rests, Kem sat in the same deep stillness he had discovered before the Sphinx. His breathing maintained its slow, rhythmic pattern, each cycle connecting him more fully to both earth and sky. Though the desert heat remained intense, it no longer registered as discomfort, but simply as another sensation arising in awareness, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, but simply present as part of the complete experience. The nights brought profound rest without conventional sleep. Lying beneath the vast star field, Kem remained consciously aware while his body received perfect renewal. In this state, the boundary between waking and dreaming dissolved, allowing a continuous flow of perception unrestricted by ordinary categories of experience. Images, insights, and direct knowing moved through his awareness like clouds across the sky, each arising naturally and passing without attachment. By the journey's third day, the distant green line of the oasis appeared on the eastern horizon. The sight created no particular excitement or relief, simply the recognition of the next natural phase in his journey. As he approached the first scattered palms at the settlement's edge, Kem noticed how his perception continued to operate with the same clarity and expansion he had experienced at the plateau. The transition from desert solitude to human community would provide its own form of teaching. Entering the oasis in late afternoon, Kem felt the quality of air change. From the dry purity of the desert to the more complex mixture of vegetation, water, and human activity, scents reached him in layers. The sharp green of palm fronds, the mineral richness of wet earth, the smoke from cooking fires, the subtle perfume of flowering plants. These sensations registered clearly in his awareness without creating disturbance in the underlying stillness. People noticed his return, some calling greetings or raising hands in welcome. Kem responded with genuine warmth while maintaining the deeper quiet he had discovered. His interactions felt simultaneously more authentic and less personal, fully present with each individual, while remaining established in the witnessing awareness beyond momentary exchange. This dual perspective allowed a quality of listening and response that created immediate connection. As evening approached, Kem made his way toward the circular dwelling at the settlement's western edge. He found Nefert in her garden, just as on the day of his departure, carefully tending plants in the golden light of sunset. She looked up as he approached, her eyes taking in his appearance with careful attention. A subtle smile of recognition crossed her features, suggesting she perceived the change that had occurred during his absence. "You have met the Guardian," she said simply. It wasn't a question, but an acknowledgement. "Yes," Kem replied, the single word carrying more meaning than extended explanation could convey. Nefert nodded, continuing her work among the plants. "And its riddles?" "Not what I expected," Kem said after a thoughtful pause. "Not puzzles to solve, but doorways to pass through." This response seemed to please her. She straightened from her work, studying him more directly now. "The journey changes those who undertake it with proper preparation," she observed. "Not through addition, but through recognition." They sat together as darkness gradually embraced the oasis, speaking little but sharing a comfortable silence that required no filling. The sounds of evening created a gentle background, children being called to evening meals, water being drawn from the central pool, night birds beginning their calls from the palm fronds above. These ordinary activities continued around them, while their shared stillness created a different kind of space. "What will you do now?" Nefer asked eventually as the first stars appeared overhead. Kem considered this question without hurry. The future no longer presented itself as a problem to solve or a path to determine. Rather, it appeared as an open field of possibility, each moment revealing its own natural movement. "Continue to listen," he said finally. "The Guardian's teaching doesn't end with physical departure. That is well understood," Nefert acknowledged. Few travelers recognize this continuity. Many seek remarkable experience, rather than the recognition that transforms ordinary perception. They shared a simple meal as full darkness settled around them. Fresh bread, dates from the oasis palms, clear water sweetened slightly with honey. Each taste registered with remarkable clarity in Kem's awareness. The simple food providing both nourishment and pleasure, without creating craving for more. The act of eating itself became a natural meditation, each motion and sensation part of the complete experience of the moment. That night, Kem slept beneath the stars at the oasis edge, the same spot where he had rested before beginning his desert crossing. The familiar sounds of settlement life mingled with the greater silence of the desert beyond, creating a rich auditory landscape that didn't disturb his deep peace. His body rested completely, sinking into the sand with perfect heaviness, while his awareness remained gently alert to the night's unfolding sensations. Morning came with pearl gray light gradually warming to gold. Kem woke with the first brightness, his transition from sleep to wakefulness so smooth as to be nearly imperceptible. The quality of awareness remained consistent regardless of state, the same witnessing presence maintained through all cycles of consciousness. He performed his morning movements with particular attention, each stretch and balance expressing the integration of body and awareness he had discovered. As the Oasis community began its day around him, Kem recognized that the time had come to continue his journey, not from restlessness or dissatisfaction, but from the natural flow that now guided his movements through the world. He gathered his few possessions, refilled his water skin at the central pool, and accepted a small package of provisions from a family he had assisted before his desert crossing. He found Nefert at her dwelling, already aware of his imminent departure. "The river calls you back," she observed as he approached. "Yes," Kem acknowledged, though not the same river nor the same traveler. She smiled at this, a full expression that transformed her usually reserved features. The ancient teaching in its simplest form, never the same river, never the same person, yet always only water flowing. She pressed a small packet of herbs into his hand. "For those you may meet who have ears to hear and hearts to recognize." Their farewell was brief and without unnecessary sentiment, a simple acknowledgement of connection that required no elaborate expression. As Kem turned eastward toward the rising sun and the distant river valley beyond, he carried within him both the Sphinx's silent teaching and Nefert's living embodiment of that same wisdom. The journey ahead would unfold according to its own natural pattern, each step revealed in the moment of its taking. The path leading from the oasis toward the Nile Valley presented a gradual transition from desert austerity to increasing signs of human habitation. Small settlements appeared more frequently. Cultivated fields extended further into previously barren land. Travelers became more common on the well-worn paths. Throughout this changing landscape, Kem maintained the same quality of presence he had discovered before the Sphinx, fully engaged with each encounter, while remaining established in the witnessing awareness beyond all temporary experience. His interactions with others took on a new quality. People responded to his presence in unusual ways, often sharing thoughts or concerns they might normally keep private. Children approached him with natural curiosity, sensing something trustworthy in his manner. Even animals seemed to recognize something in his energy. Domestic creatures coming nearer than usual, wild ones watching without fear before continuing their activities. These responses didn't create pride or special status in Kem's perception, simply the natural reflection of the clarity he now embodied. While traveling between settlements, Kem occasionally encountered others who recognized the quality of his presence, usually elders who had themselves undertaken similar journeys of discovery. These meetings would often occur without extensive conversation, perhaps just an exchanged glance or simple gesture, acknowledging shared understanding. Once, an elderly boatman ferrying him across a canal simply nodded and said, "The guardian's gaze reaches far beyond its stone eyes." No further explanation was necessary or offered. As he approached more populated regions, Kem began sharing aspects of his understanding with those who expressed sincere interest. These weren't formal teachings or structured discussions, but natural conversations arising from immediate circumstances. A farmer concerned about failing crop might discover the new perspective on impermanence and renewal. A young parent worried about their child's future might find peace in recognizing the deeper awareness already present within both parent and child. These exchanges never focused on Kem's personal experience or journey, but rather invited direct recognition in the listener's own awareness. The herb packet Nefertiti had given him proved useful in these situations. A small pinch steeped in water created a subtle shift in perception that could help bridge the gap between conceptual understanding and direct recognition. Kem offered these preparations carefully, only to those who demonstrated genuine readiness to see beyond conventional limitations. Throughout these travels and encounters, Kem's own understanding continued to deepen and clarify. The recognition that had occurred before the Sphinx wasn't a static achievement, but a living process that revealed new dimensions with each experience. Ordinary activities, walking, eating, conversing, resting, became vehicles for this ongoing discovery, each moment offering fresh opportunity to perceive the unchanging awareness expressing itself through ever-changing form. Eventually, his path brought him to the outskirts of Thebes, the great city he had left years earlier at the beginning of his wanderings. The contrast between the desert's vast silence and the city's constant activity was striking. Yet Kem found that the same expanded awareness accommodated both experiences equally. The myriad sounds, scents, and sights of urban life registered clearly in his perception without creating the overwhelm or agitation that such stimulation might previously have induced. Moving through the familiar streets that had once been his home, Kem noticed how much remained the same, while his perception had so fundamentally transformed. The same temples raised their massive pylons toward the sky. The same markets buzzed with commerce and conversation. The same Nile flowed in its eternal passage northward. Yet all was seen now through the clarified vision that recognized both the passing form and the unchanging awareness within which all forms appear and disappear. He found his father's pottery workshop still operating, now managed by his younger brother who had developed considerable skill during Kem's absence. Their reunion was warm, though slightly reserved, the years of separation having created some natural distance. Yet as they spent time working together at the pottery wheel, a different kind of connection established itself, not based on shared history or family obligation, but on the simple presence each brought to the shared activity. Over subsequent days, Kem settled into a pattern that balanced solitude and engagement. Mornings were devoted to quiet contemplation at the river's edge, where the first light illuminated the water in ways that echoed his desert dawn experiences. Days were spent assisting in the workshop, his hands remembering the familiar motions of shaping clay while his awareness remained spacious and undisturbed by the activity. Evenings often found him in conversation with various individuals who sensed something valuable in his presence and sought him out with questions or concerns. Throughout these activities, the Sphinx's silent teaching continued to operate within him. The riddles that had initially opened doorways of perception now functioned as continuous invitations to deeper recognition in each moment. What sees without eyes? The awareness witnessing the bustling city street. What moves without changing position? The presence animating each person he encountered. What remains when all questions cease? The recognition available in every experience, regardless of its outer form. As weeks passed in this manner, Kem noticed an interesting development. Without any formal announcement or organized structure, a small community began to form around the simple clarity he embodied. People from various walks of life, craftsmen, merchants, temple scribes, ordinary workers, began gathering regularly in the evenings to sit in shared silence and engage in the kind of direct inquiry that Kem had discovered before the Sphinx. These weren't disciples seeking teachings, but fellow explorers drawn to the possibility of seeing beyond conventional limitations. One evening, as such a gathering dispersed after a particularly deep period of shared stillness, an elderly temple scribe remained behind. He had been observing these informal meetings with quiet interest for several weeks, without actively participating. Now, as the others departed, he approached Kem with an expression of thoughtful consideration. "What you have discovered is not new," the scribe said without preamble, "yet it is forever new in each who recognizes it directly." He studied Kem's face carefully before continuing. "The temple archives contain accounts of others who have returned from the Sphinx with this same clear seeing. Some remained silent, others shared openly, each according to their nature and the needs of their time." Kem listened without comment, sensing there was more to come. "In the inner chambers," the scribe continued, "there are wall carvings dating from the earliest dynasties. They depict the guardian not merely as monument, but as doorway, the threshold between formed knowledge and formless understanding." He paused, choosing his next words with care. "Those who maintain these records have preserved something else as well, a tradition of inquiry very similar to what naturally emerges in your presence." With this statement, the elderly man extended a formal invitation, not to join the temple hierarchy or adopt any official role, but to engage with a small group of individuals who had maintained this seeing tradition throughout countless generations of external religious and political change. These weren't priests performing public ceremonies, but quiet seekers committed to direct recognition above all doctrines and beliefs. Kem considered this invitation with the same clear awareness he brought to all decisions now. There was no personal ambition or special status involved, simply the natural movement toward shared understanding that had characterized his interactions since returning from the desert. After a period of thoughtful silence, he indicated his willingness to meet with this group, not as teacher or authority, but as fellow explorer of the same timeless recognition. The following weeks brought a gradual integration of these various elements of Kem's life in Thebes. The quiet mornings by the river, the engaged activity at the workshop, the evening gatherings with those drawn to his natural clarity, and now periodic meetings with the temple tradition keepers. Throughout these diverse contexts, the same quality of presence remained undiminished, neither diluted by worldly engagement nor dependent on special conditions for its maintenance. As seasons changed and the Nile completed its annual cycle of flood and recession, Kem found himself increasingly established in the understanding that had first dawned before the Sphinx. This wasn't a state to achieve or maintain, but the natural condition that reveals itself when habitual patterns of thought and perception fall away. Sometimes he would describe it as seeing from silence or listening with the whole body. Simple phrases pointing toward direct experience beyond all concepts. The circular dwelling at the desert oasis and the massive stone guardian on its plateau remained vivid in his awareness, not as memories of past experience, but as ever-present reminders of the journey that continues in each moment. Nefert's quiet wisdom and the Sphinx's silent gaze had been different expressions of the same fundamental recognition that what we truly are has never been absent, merely overlooked in our absorption with the passing phenomena. This understanding, once directly recognized, continued to reveal new dimensions in every circumstance. Whether shaping clay with practiced hands, listening to a troubled stranger's concerns, or sitting in silence with fellow seekers, Kem found that the same clear seeing operated without effort or intention. This wasn't a special state to enter or leave, but the natural condition that remains when all unnecessary activity of mind comes to rest in its own source. As one particularly beautiful evening descended over Thebes, Kem stood at the river's edge watching the last light play across the water's surface. A young boy approached, a child he had noticed watching the pottery workshop with fascination for several days. Without introduction or explanation, the boy asked simply, "What did you find in the desert?" Kem smiled at the directness of the question, recognizing the same genuine curiosity that had propelled his own journey. Kneeling to meet the child at eye level, he replied with equal simplicity, "I found that what I was seeking had never been lost. The eyes that look are what they're looking for." The boy's expression registered neither confusion nor complete understanding, but something between: the recognition that he had received something important to consider. With a respectful nod that seemed beyond his years, he turned and ran back toward the city streets, perhaps carrying the seed of his own future journey. Watching the child disappear into the gathering dusk, Kem felt a deep contentment that transcended personal satisfaction. The Sphinx would continue its eternal gaze across the desert, offering its riddles to those prepared to listen. The understanding it embodied would find expression through countless individuals across generations yet to come. His own journey, from wanderer to witness, was just one instance of a timeless pattern that would repeat as long as humans looked up from their ordinary concerns to question what lies beyond appearing and disappearing forms. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Kem recognized the same constellations that had guided his desert crossing. They shone now with the same steady light, whether observed from city streets or empty desert, their patterns unchanged by the observer's location. In this simple astronomical fact, he found a perfect metaphor for the awareness he had discovered, present in all places and times, unchanging amidst constant change, available to anyone who pauses long enough to look beyond surface appearances to the deeper reality always shining through. With this recognition, Kem turned from the river's edge and walked unhurriedly back toward the lighted dwellings of Thebes, each step connecting fully with the ground beneath, each breath circulating freely through his relaxed body, each perception arising and passing in the clear space of awareness that had always been his true home. The years that followed unfolded with natural simplicity. Kem continued his balanced life in Thebes, creating beautiful pottery with his brother during the day and sharing quiet presence with those drawn to the clarity he embodied during evenings. He remained connected to the small group of temple tradition keepers, participating in their ancient practices of inquiry while maintaining his independence from formal religious structures. This integration of ordinary activity and profound understanding created a life that demonstrated wisdom through direct expression rather than abstracted teaching. The pottery workshop itself gradually transformed under the influence of this integrated awareness. The brothers began creating vessels that somehow embodied the same qualities of presence and clarity that characterized their creator's consciousness. These pieces weren't merely functional or decorative, but carried a subtle energy that customers often commented on without fully understanding its source. "There's something different about these vessels," people would say. "They seem to bring a certain peace into the home." This quality didn't come from special techniques or designs, but from the state of awareness during creation. Kem worked with complete presence, each movement expressing the same understanding that had dawned before the Sphinx. His hands shaped clay with perfect attention, neither hurried nor hesitant, responding to the material's nature rather than imposing predetermined forms. The results were pieces of remarkable harmony and balance, simple in appearance yet somehow conveying something beyond ordinary craftsmanship. As word of these unusual vessels spread, the workshop attracted visitors from increasingly distant regions. Some came purely for the pottery, others sensing there was something more significant to be discovered in the presence of their creator. Kem welcomed all with the same quiet attention, never presenting himself as teacher or guide, but simply remaining available to whatever each encounter might require. For those who expressed sincere interest in the understanding behind his work, Kem would sometimes offer simple analogies drawn from the pottery process itself. See how the clay must be properly centered before any vessel can emerge, he might observe, while demonstrating at the wheel. In the same way, awareness must find its true center before harmonious living can develop. These weren't planned teachings, but natural expressions arising from immediate circumstances, pointing toward direct recognition rather than accumulated knowledge. Throughout these years, Kem maintained a special connection with the desert and its silent guardian. Annually, as the season of cooler winds returned, he would make the journey back to the oasis and beyond, to the plateau where the Sphinx maintained its eternal vigil. These weren't pilgrimages of seeking, but rather returns to the physical location that had first catalyzed his recognition. Each visit deepened and clarified the understanding that continued to unfold in daily life. During one such journey, Kem found Nefert's circular dwelling at the oasis, edge unoccupied, its garden still thriving, but showing signs of different tending hands. The elders explained that she had departed several months earlier, walking into the deep desert beyond the plateau, following a calling similar to the one that had first drawn Kem westward years before. This news created no sense of loss, but rather a quiet acknowledgement of continuing cycles, the same wisdom finding expression through different individuals according to the needs of each era. Life flowed in this integrated manner through changing seasons and years. Kem's physical appearance gradually transformed, hair threaded with silver, face marked by lines of expression, hands showing the character that comes from decades of skilled work. Yet, the awareness animating this changing form remained unchanged. The same clear seeing that had awakened before the Sphinx, continuing to function through all physical transformations. As he entered what others would call elder years, Kem noticed an interesting development. Without conscious intention, he began spending more time by the river at dawn and dusk, sitting in simple contemplation of the flowing water and changing light. These periods weren't retreats from activity, but natural expressions of the increasingly subtle understanding that continued to reveal itself through immediate experience. The river, with its constant movement within unchanging banks, provided a perfect contemplative focus for this stage of life. During one such evening sitting, a familiar figure approached, the temple scribe who had first connected Kem with the tradition keepers, now considerably aged but moving with the same deliberate dignity. They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun completed its descent, the last golden light playing across the river's surface before yielding to the deeper blues of twilight. Stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, their reflections creating mirror images in the water below. The archives have been properly maintained, the scribe said finally, breaking the lengthy silence. The essence of your understanding has been recorded, not as doctrine, but as pointer toward direct recognition. Future generations will find these accounts when conditions ripen for renewed discovery. Kem nodded slightly, appreciating this commitment to preservation, while recognizing that the living understanding itself required no documentation. What had been discovered before the Sphinx wasn't information to be recorded, but immediate recognition available in every moment to anyone who looks with unclouded vision. Nevertheless, such pointers had value for those still journeying toward what they already are, but haven't yet recognized. The form changes, the essence remains, Kem replied simply. This phrase, which had become something of a signature expression over the years, applied equally to pottery, human lives, and wisdom traditions. In each case, outer appearance might transform while the underlying reality continued unchanged, accessible through direct perception rather than historical record. As full darkness embraced the river valley, the scribe rose to leave, his formal propriety softened by years of association with Kem's natural simplicity. I may not see the next season's flood, he remarked without self-pity, simply acknowledging the obvious progression of life. But what sees through these eyes has never been born and will never die. With these words, he departed into the gathering night, leaving Kem alone with the star-reflecting river. The exchange lingered in awareness, not as conversation to analyze, but as shared recognition beyond words. The scribe's closing statement hadn't been philosophical position, but direct testament, the same understanding expressed through different voice and form. Over subsequent months, Kem found himself increasingly drawn to simplicity in all aspects of life. The pottery workshop was gradually transferred to his brother's children, who had developed considerable skill under his guidance. His living arrangements condensed to essentials: a small room near the river with just enough space for sleeping mat, water jar, and the few tools of daily life. His diet became increasingly basic, primarily bread and vegetables with occasional fish from the river. This simplification wasn't ascetic practice or rejection of worldly engagement, but natural expression of the understanding that continued to clarify throughout his life. As recognition deepened, unnecessary complexity fell away of its own accord, leaving only what aligned with fundamental reality. The result wasn't impoverishment, but extraordinary richness of direct experience, each simple perception registering with complete clarity and unclouded awareness. Those who had gathered regularly around his quiet presence continued to do so, though the format evolved to match his current expression rather than active conversations or demonstrations. These gatherings became primarily shared silence, with occasional words arising naturally from immediate circumstance. The emphasis shifted from doing to being, from exchange to presence, from seeking to recognition of what had never been absent. As Kem's 7th decade approached, he noticed subtle signals that his physical form was beginning its natural transition. Nothing dramatic or concerning, simply the gradual loosening of connections between awareness and particular body. His breathing occasionally shifted into unusual patterns before returning to normal rhythm. Brief moments occurred when awareness seemed to expand beyond ordinary spatial limitations. Dreams and waking experience began interpenetrating in new ways. These changes created no fear or resistance, only interested observation of natural processes. Just as he had witnessed countless clay vessels move through stages of creation, use, and eventual return to base elements, he now observed his own form following similar progression. The awareness watching this process remained unchanged throughout, neither enhanced by the body's strength nor diminished by its gradual weakening. One particularly beautiful morning, as first light touched the eastern horizon with pale gold, Kem felt a clear inner signal. The time had come for a final journey to the plateau and its silent guardian. This wasn't dramatic revelation or supernatural communication, simply natural recognition arising in awareness, like the potter's fingers knowing precisely when the clay has reached proper consistency for working. Preparations for this journey were minimal. His needs had simplified to the point where little more than water skin, walking staff, and single cloak were required. He informed his brother and the small circle of close companions about his intention, not seeking permission or approval, but simply sharing the natural movement that was occurring. Their responses reflected years of shared understanding. No dramatic farewells or expressions of loss, just quiet acknowledgement of transitions inherent in all manifestation. The journey began at dawn several days later, Kem walking eastward, away from the rising sun, following the same route that had first led him to the desert oasis years earlier. His pace was unhurried yet steady, each step connecting fully with the earth beneath. His physical condition, though showing signs of advancing years, remained remarkably sound, the natural result of lifetime lived in harmony with body's true nature, rather than in conflict with its limitations. As settled lands gave way to increasing emptiness, Kem felt familiar expansion of awareness that desert spaces facilitate. Without constant stimulation of human activity, perception naturally clarifies and deepens, revealing dimensions of experience often overlooked in busier environments. The subtle sounds of wind moving across sand, the quality of light changing throughout the day, the texture of earth beneath each footstep, all registered with perfect clarity, an awareness unclouded by unnecessary thought. The journey to the oasis proceeded without incident, each day's walk-in followed by nights of deep rest beneath a star-filled sky. Upon arrival, Kem found the settlement prospering, with new generations continuing the balanced life that had characterized this place for countless years. Several elders recognized him despite the passage of time, welcoming him with quiet respect that required no elaborate expression. Nefert's circular dwelling remained, now occupied by a woman of similar quality, though different temperament, who offered him use of the garden space for his night's rest. After a single day's pause to replenish water and prepare for the deeper desert crossing, Kem continued westward toward the plateau. The route remained essentially as he remembered, though specific features had changed through years of wind and occasional rain reshaping the landscape. These alterations created no difficulties, as his navigation relied more on inner alignment than external landmarks. Each day's journey unfolded with natural ease, his body finding appropriate pace without strain or hesitation. When he finally ascended the plateau's edge and the Sphinx came into view, Kem experienced a recognition beyond ordinary memory. This wasn't merely revisiting significant location from personal history, but reconnecting with timeless reality that transcends individual experience. the monument remained unchanged by intervening years, its massive form containing the same silent teaching that had catalyzed his initial awakening. As before, Kem approached with appropriate respect, stopping at distance that felt intuitively correct. The sun was approaching horizon behind him, illuminating the Sphinx's weathered features with golden light that emphasized its living quality despite its stone substance. Without conscious planning, he seated himself in the same position he had occupied years earlier, body settling naturally into cross-legged posture that provided perfect stability. In this moment of return, something extraordinary yet entirely natural occurred. The boundaries that normally maintain separation between moments in time became permeable, allowing simultaneous experience of past, present, and potential future. Keem perceived his younger self seated in this same location years earlier, engaging with the silent riddles that had opened doorways of recognition. Simultaneously, he experienced his current presence, the culmination of understanding that had unfolded throughout subsequent years, and somehow he also perceived countless others who had sat or would sit before this same monument throughout vast stretches of time, each finding their unique expression of the same timeless recognition. This perception wasn't mystical vision or supernatural experience, but direct recognition of what exists beyond conventional limitations of individual identity and linear time. The understanding that had dawned and developed throughout Kem's life now revealed its ultimate implication, that awareness itself transcends all particular expressions, while simultaneously manifesting as each unique form and experience. The young wanderer, the mature craftsman, and the elderly returnee were different expressions of the same fundamental reality, as were all beings throughout all times. As darkness embraced the plateau, stars emerging in breathtaking profusion overhead, Kem remained in perfect stillness, his breathing gradually slowed to profound calmness, each cycle more extended and subtle than the last. Physical sensation began to transform, the usual boundaries of body becoming increasingly permeable. These changes registered in awareness without creating disturbance or concern, simply natural transitions being observed with clear seeing. Throughout the night, this process continued, consciousness gradually releasing its identification with particular form while remaining fully present and aware. By the time first light touched the eastern horizon, meeting the Sphinx's eternal gaze, something significant had shifted. The awareness that had animated Kem's particular form throughout his lifetime remained vibrantly present, yet increasingly unconstrained by individual boundaries. As the sun cleared the horizon, illuminating the monument with clear morning light, a final recognition dawned. The riddle that had been present throughout his entire journey, underlying all other questions, revealed its perfect resolution. What remains when the questioner dissolves? The answer came not as concept or explanation, but as direct experience beyond all words, pure awareness beholding itself through temporarily individualized expressions, the ultimate subject that can never become object, the seeing that can never be seen yet illuminates all that appears. In this recognition, the cycle initiated before the Sphinx years earlier reached its natural completion. The understanding that had dawned then and developed throughout subsequent life now revealed its final implication, not as achievement to claim, but as reality to recognize. Kem's particular expression had served its purpose in the greater pattern, embodying this understanding through one unique form, while pointing toward what transcends all forms. As the sun continued its ascent, warming the ancient stone of both plateau and monument, the awareness that had identified itself as Kem throughout one human lifetime released completely into its true nature. The physical form seated before the Sphinx gradually stilled, breathing slowing until it finally ceased altogether. Yet something remained undiminished. The same clear seeing that had always been present, now continuing without identification with a particular vessel. When desert travelers discovered the body some days later, they found it seated in perfect posture, face-bearing expression of profound peace that transcended ordinary human emotion, following customs of deep respect for those who complete their journey in the desert. They created simple stone marker at that exact location, adding one more element to the eternal conversation between human awareness and desert silence that has continued throughout countless generations. In the village, workshop, and temple chambers of Thebes, those who had known Kem felt his departure not as absence, but as transformation. The understanding he had embodied continued to express itself through their own recognition, each finding unique form for the same timeless awareness. The vessels created in the pottery workshop maintained their distinctive quality, somehow conveying through clay and glaze the presence that transcends all material forms. And far to the west, beyond the settled lands where most human lives unfold, the Sphinx continued its eternal vigil, stone eyes gazing eastward toward each new dawn. Silent witness to countless human journeys, it remained what it had always been, not merely monument or guardian, but doorway between formed knowledge and formless understanding. Invitation to recognize what exists prior to all questions and survives all answers. Its riddles continue to await those prepared to listen, not with ordinary mind, but with the heart of awareness itself, the true identity that has never been lost, only temporarily forgotten in absorption with passing forms. The desert night wrapped around the plateau in a blanket of profound stillness. Stars scattered across the vast darkness above created a celestial map that had guided travelers for countless generations. The Sphinx remained in its eternal repose, stone body stretched upon the ancient limestone, human face gazing eastward toward the horizon where dawn would eventually appear. And seated before this timeless guardian, the form that had been Kem rested in perfect peace, the journey of one particular life having reached its natural completion. The awareness that had animated this form throughout its lifetime continued unchanged, though no longer identified with individual expression. Like water returning to the ocean after journey through cloud, river, and countless vessels, the consciousness that had known itself as I dissolved back into its source without diminishing its essential nature. This wasn't ending, but fulfillment, not loss, but recognition of what cannot be lost, the natural completion of cycle that begins and ends in the same timeless presence. Had there been anyone to witness this transition, they might have noticed subtle qualities in the atmosphere surrounding the seated figure, a palpable stillness deeper than ordinary silence, a clarity in the air that seemed to enhance perception itself, perhaps even a subtle luminosity that had nothing to do with external light sources. These weren't supernatural phenomena, but natural expressions of consciousness released from individual constraints, the same presence that animates all life simply manifesting without the usual limitations of particular form. Throughout the night, this presence remained, embracing both monument and seated figure in awareness beyond personal boundaries, The desert itself seemed to respond with its own deepening stillness, as if acknowledging completion of pattern that had been unfolding throughout one human lifetime. Wind that normally whispered across sand and stone fell completely quiet. Even the small creatures that typically scurried across the plateau seemed to pause, as if honoring the transition occurring in their midst. As hours passed in this perfect stillness, the eastern horizon began to lighten almost imperceptibly. Stars nearest the Earth's edge gradually faded as the first hint of dawn approached. The quality of darkness shifted from complete black to deepening blue, then to subtle purple, touching the place where sky met earth. This daily miracle of light's return, witnessed by the Sphinx throughout uncounted millennia, now unfolded once more in perfect harmony with cosmic rhythms. The seated figure remained motionless as this transformation of darkness to light progressed. Physical processes had completed their final cycle, the body returning to the stillness from which all form eventually emerges and to which it ultimately returns. Yet something of Kem's presence remained infused in this place, not as ghost or spirit in the conventional sense, but as quality of awareness that transcends individual boundaries. The understanding he had embodied throughout life continued beyond the form that had temporarily expressed it. First, direct light touched the Sphinx's face, illuminating features weathered by countless years, yet still conveying serene awareness that transcends time itself. This same light fell upon the seated figure, creating gentle glow that emphasized the peaceful expression remaining on features no longer animated by breath or pulse. In this perfect stillness, distinction between monument and meditator seemed to dissolve, both expressing same fundamental reality through different forms and time frames. The lesson of Kem's journey had never been about achieving special state or accumulating esoteric knowledge, but about recognizing what exists prior to all seeking and survives all finding. The wanderer who had crossed the desert seeking answers had discovered something both utterly ordinary and completely extraordinary. The awareness witnessing all experience is itself the treasure being sought, the querent and the quest inseparable aspects of the same reality. This recognition, once directly perceived, transforms every dimension of living without changing anything fundamental about one's essential nature. This understanding remains available in every moment to anyone who pauses the endless movement of seeking to look directly at the awareness in which all experience appears. The Sphinx continues its silent invitation across millennia, not as monument requiring pilgrimage, but as symbol of the timeless presence that exists wherever consciousness finds itself. Its riddles are not puzzles to be solved intellectually, but doorways to be entered experientially, each opening to the same recognition that transformed Kem's perception and ultimately transcended his individual existence. As the sun climbed higher above the horizon, its warmth began to penetrate the cool night air that had embraced the plateau throughout darkness hours. Desert life gradually resumed its activities, small lizards emerging to capture morning warmth, birds circling overhead in search of sustenance, plants turning microscopic leaves toward life-giving light. The perfect stillness of night's deepest hours naturally transitioned to the gentle movement of day's beginning, all unfolding in the same seamless awareness that witnesses without disturbance. This transition from darkness to light, from stillness to movement, from formless timelessness to form mirrors. The journey each consciousness takes throughout cycles of sleep and waking, life and death, forgetting and remembering, we move between these apparent opposites, while something unchanging witnesses the entire journey, neither enhanced by acquisition nor diminished by loss. This witnessing presence remains our true identity beneath all temporary expressions and experiences, the foundation that supports every moment of existence, while itself remaining untouched by constant change. As you continue to listen, allow yourself to rest more deeply in this unchanging awareness that exists beneath all passing thoughts, sensations, and states. Your body knows how to find perfect comfort, gradually releasing any remaining tension or effort. Your breathing continues its natural rhythm without requiring conscious control. Your mind gently quiets, thoughts coming less frequently and passing more easily, like ripples on a lake that gradually subside into unmoving stillness. This peaceful state emerges naturally when doing gives way to being, when seeking resolves into finding, when the questioner recognizes itself as the answer it has been seeking. The essence of Kem's journey now becomes your own invitation to rest, not just the physical rest of sleep, but the deeper rest of consciousness recognizing its own nature. Like the wanderer before the Sphinx, you can allow all questions to resolve into the silence from which they arose. Like the desert beneath star-filled sky, you can experience the perfect peace that comes when thinking subsides and pure awareness remains. This isn't something to achieve through effort, but something to recognize through letting go, the natural state that reveals itself when all unnecessary activity ceases. Feel how your body grows increasingly heavy against the surface, supporting it, warmth spreading through your limbs as tension continues to release. Notice how your breathing has found its own perfect rhythm, each inhale bringing renewal, each exhale deepening relaxation. Experience the quieting of your mind as thoughts become less frequent, less demanding, less able to disturb the peaceful awareness in which they appear and disappear. All of these natural processes unfold by themselves when given permission, requiring nothing from you but gentle acceptance. Just as Kem's journey reached its natural completion in perfect peace before the silent guardian, your day now completes itself in the perfect peace of approaching sleep. All activities, all concerns, all responsibilities find their proper conclusion as you give yourself permission to release completely into rest. Like the desert surrendering to night's embrace, you can surrender to the quiet darkness that brings renewal and restoration. This surrender isn't defeat, but fulfillment, not loss, but completion, the natural cycle that returns all doing to the being from which it arose. The Sphinx waits in timeless stillness, massive form, resting on ancient limestone, weathered face, gazing eternally eastward. Before it sits a figure in perfect peace, journey completed, understanding fulfilled. Desert surrounds them both, vast and quiet beneath countless stars. This scene contains everything, the transient and the eternal, form and formlessness, the seeker and what is sought. As you settle more deeply into comfort, this image can accompany you toward the threshold of sleep, a reminder of the peace that awaits when questioning mind surrenders to direct recognition. Feel how your body has become wonderfully heavy against the surface supporting it. Your muscles have released their daytime tension, allowing your full weight to be completely held. There's nothing you need to adjust or improve, just this perfect surrender to gravity's gentle embrace. Your limbs feel pleasantly warm, perhaps slightly tingly with relaxation that continues to deepen with each passing moment. This physical letting go mirrors the deeper surrender that allows consciousness to transition naturally from waking to sleeping, from activity to restoration. Your breathing has found its own gentle rhythm, each cycle slightly deeper and slower than the last. The inhale comes without effort, bringing fresh energy that circulates throughout your relaxed body. The exhale flows out easily, carrying away any remaining tension or concern. There's nothing to manage or control in this process. Your body knows exactly how to breathe for perfect rest. This natural wisdom operates without your conscious direction. The same intelligence that maintains countless functions while you sleep. Notice how your mind is gradually quieted, thoughts becoming less frequent and less compelling. They may still arise occasionally, but they no longer capture your attention or create disturbance. Like distant clouds passing across an otherwise clear sky, they appear and disappear without affecting the vast stillness in which they move. This mental quieting happens naturally as physical relaxation deepens, the thinking mind relinquishing its daytime dominance as awareness settles into its own peaceful nature. The wanderer rests before the silent guardian, all questions resolved in recognition beyond words. Desert night embraces them both in perfect stillness. Stars overhead reflect in eyes no longer seeing separate objects, but perceiving the unity underlying all appearance. This moment contains the essence of every journey ever undertaken, the circular path that begins and ends in the same timeless presence, though forever transformed by the traveling. Allow this image to dissolve into its component sensations: warmth, heaviness, quietness, peace. Qualities now appearing in your own experience as sleep draws nearer. With each breath, relaxation flows more deeply through your body. Heavy warmth spreads from your center outward, gentle waves of comfort reaching every part of your physical form. Your face has softened completely, forehead smooth, jaw released, tongue resting easily in your mouth. Your shoulders have dropped away from your ears, arms heavy against the surface beneath them. Your chest rises and falls with the slow, deep breaths, each cycle bringing further surrender. Your hips, legs, and feet have released all holding, their weight fully surrendered to the supportive surface below. Your mind continues its natural quieting, thoughts becoming ever more distant and dreamlike. Whatever arises passes easily without creating disturbance or requiring response. This happens without effort when you allow awareness to rest in its own nature, rather than following each thought that appears. Like the desert becoming increasingly still as night deepens, your consciousness naturally settles into peaceful quiet as sleep approaches. This transition unfolds perfectly by itself when given permission to proceed at its own pace. The Sphinx has witnessed countless sunrises and sunsets, innumerable human lifetimes passing before its eternal gaze. Its silent teaching remains the same throughout all changes. The invitation to recognize what exists prior to all questions and survives all answers. This recognition doesn't disappear during sleep, but continues as the foundation underlying all states of consciousness. As you drift toward deeper rest, this unchanging awareness remains, embracing both waking and sleeping as equal expressions of its infinite nature. Breathing in, you receive perfect renewal. Breathing out, you release completely into peace, Breathing in, warmth spreads throughout your heavy body. Breathing out, your mind grows increasingly quiet. Breathing in, you remain connected to simple awareness. Breathing out, all boundaries begin to dissolve. Breathing in, you appreciate the perfect support beneath you. Breathing out, you surrender fully to approaching sleep. This natural rhythm continues without effort, each cycle bringing you closer to the threshold between waking and dreaming. The wanderer and the Sphinx merge in silent communion beyond time and separation. Desert and sky, earth and stars, form and emptiness, all appear as aspects of the same indivisible reality. This unity isn't something created through practice, but recognized as always already present, the natural condition revealed when conceptual divisions fall away. As sleep draws ever nearer, you too can experience this gentle dissolution of boundaries, the peaceful merging of observer and observed that happens naturally when effort ceases and surrender completes itself. Your body has become so comfortable, so heavy, so completely at rest. Each breath comes more slowly, more deeply, requiring nothing from you but simple allowing. Your mind has quieted to the point where thoughts barely arise, and when they do, they dissolve almost immediately without disturbance. Your awareness has begun to float free from its usual anchors, expanding and softening at the edges as sleep's gentle current carries you toward its peaceful depths. There's nothing you need to do or manage. Just continue allowing this natural process to unfold at its perfect pace. The desert night cradles all in profound silence. Ancient monument, seated figure, vast landscape beneath infinite sky. This silence isn't absence but presence, not emptiness but fullness beyond ordinary perception. It contains all possible sounds while itself remaining undisturbed, just as awareness contains all possible experiences while itself remaining unchanged. As you drift closer to sleep, you can rest in similar silence, the peaceful quiet that emerges when mental chatter subsides and pure consciousness remains, witnessing the gentle transition from one state to another. Breathing in, peaceful awareness. Breathing out, complete surrender. Breathing in, gentle warmth. Breathing out, perfect heaviness. Breathing in, quiet mind. Breathing out, boundless peace. Breathing in, complete support. Breathing out, letting go entirely. Each breath carries you closer to sleep's threshold, each cycle deepening your surrender to rest's gentle embrace. Nothing to solve, nothing to figure out, nothing to control or manage. Just this natural unfolding that happens perfectly by itself when given complete permission. Desert stars shine overhead, their ancient light traveling across vast distances to reach this single point in space and time. The Sphinx receives this light as it has for countless millennia, silent witness to cycles beyond human reckoning. The seated figure reflects this same witnessing quality, individual awareness having merged with the greater consciousness from which it temporarily emerged. This eternal moment contains all moments. This single point connects to all points. This perfect stillness embraces all movement. As sleep approaches, you too can rest in this timeless presence that continues unchanged through all states of consciousness. Your breathing has become so soft, so slow, so deeply peaceful. Your body feels wonderfully heavy, warm, completely supported. Your mind has quieted to near perfect stillness. thoughts appearing only occasionally, like distant stars glimpsed through passing clouds. Awareness itself has begun to shift and transform, expanding beyond its usual boundaries as sleep's gentle current carries you closer to its peaceful depths. This natural transition requires nothing from you now but complete allowing, perfect surrender to the restoration that awaits on sleep's other shore. The wanderer's journey completes itself in recognition beyond individual identity. The desert embraces all in perfect silence. The stars continue their eternal patterns overhead. The Sphinx maintains its timeless vigil, stone eyes gazing toward horizon, where each new day will eventually appear. These images now merge and dissolve into pure sensation. Heaviness, warmth, quietness, peace. The essential qualities that accompany consciousness as it transitions naturally from waking to sleeping, from doing to being, from seeking to finding. Allow yourself to rest completely in these sensations as sleep draws ever nearer. Breathing in, peaceful awareness. Breathing out, complete surrender. Breathing in, gentle support. Breathing out, perfect letting go. Breathing in, quiet mind. Breathing out, boundless rest. The journey resolves into peaceful stillness. The questions dissolve into silent recognition. The seeker merges with what was sought. The day completes itself in perfect peace. Awareness gently shifts towards sleep. Each breath brings deeper surrender. Rest embraces you completely now, simply allowing sleep to come naturally, releasing all effort completely, surrendering to perfect peace, drifting towards silent depths, letting go entirely now. Peaceful rest awaits. Sleep approaches gently. Thank you for joining this journey to ancient Egypt and the timeless wisdom of the Sphinx. May your sleep be deep, your rest complete, and your dreams peaceful as you continue to travel through the night. Good night. you.